Hi, you guys. I am back. It's week 3 of Working While Wounded. First of all, can we just take a second? Because I decided to try out a new filming location on my couch, my real couch, not my little reading couch. And I don't know why I didn't think to do this before, because the setup is just something feels different. Okay, we're still not at a real, true 2-chair, one fake plant podcast level aesthetic, but we're getting there. Okay, so I gotta trust the process. Anyways, I'm really excited, honestly, because today I kind of took a leap of faith, you could say. I hadn't opened up about Working While Wounded on like my personal Instagram page where I have like all my actual friends and people that I follow, because honestly, I was scared. Like, what if it doesn't work out? What if it's a flop? What if, like nobody cares? And so I kind of just been building this thing silently with the Lord, posting it every week to all my subscribers and all 30 of you. I've just been kind of working it quietly in the background, but the Lord asked me a question and he was like, are you ready for it to be public? Like really, truly public, meaning everyone in your life knows that you're doing this. And I wasn't. He asked me that probably like a couple weeks ago and I wasn't ready. But today, oh my gosh, I had faith and I said, Lord, let this reach who it needs to reach. I don't want to hide anymore. I'm out of the closet. Okay. With that, you know what I mean. Like the secret's out. The cat's out of the bag. Okay. So yeah, I just had this like crazy act of faith. And I got on, I made a reel, I posted it to both my Working While Wounded page and my personal page. And so it's out. So I am fully operating in this purpose, fully operating in this calling, not hiding it from anyone, not being ashamed of it, even if it fails, even if it doesn't work out. But that's besides the point. Entry 3, that's what I'm filming today. And it is called The Great Wave of Separation. I made an Instagram post the other day that said, I'll never understand the way that God can make you feel like the sun shines and the waves crash just for you. Now, let's think about that. The question that I want to ask you today is, what would happen if the waves in your life weren't crashing against you, but instead they were crashing for you? Now, this is a question, okay? That's a question to be pondering on. Because a lot of times I think we think in life things are just happening against us, like the world is just working against us. But what if God actually had a completely different reason for why we're experiencing what we're experiencing than what we think the reason is? And the story that I want to take us to in the Bible is about Joseph. Okay, Joseph, King of Dreams, get into Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. That's where we're going to be reading from today. And honestly, this is talking about a season of separation. Okay. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this dream that I had. So the dream that I had on 4th of July was interesting. And this is crazy because I really don't dream that much anymore, you guys. Like I have had to see doctors because I'm like, I don't even think I'm hitting REM sleep, like the proper cycle of sleep that I need to be hitting to feel like I'm getting good sleep. But lately, whenever I do get a dream, it's always something like profound and I have to write it down because I'm like, Lord, you must be speaking, gracing my brain with this imagery for me to wake up and remember and write down. Okay. So the dream that I had, right, it was really crazy. Honestly, I was in a city. I don't even know what city I was in. I honestly think I might have been on the island in Hawaii, but I don't know. It just was a city. It had a lot of tall buildings, skyscraper type. But there was also a lot of rooftop bars, Anyway, so in the dream, there was this massive flood that was coming through the city. It was like water was just rushing and crashing against every building. and it was like hitting, windows were breaking, things were just bad. It was like a tsunami or something. And I didn't really know what to do because I'd never been in that situation before personally, thankfully. But I remember that I was with one of my older sisters, and I'm very close with her even today. But we were together, and we ended up climbing all the way to the top of this rooftop because we're like, there's nowhere to go. The water's rising. Like, this is one of the buildings that we've seen that doesn't have any water at the top. So let's just get there and hope for the best. So we get to the top of the rooftop, and there is a DJ stage up there. Not sure what to do with that. It was like it was really a rooftop bar. Okay. So we climb up there, we get onto the stage, and the only thing that I see really on the stage that stands out is these two big box-like white speakers. Like, they're two individual speakers, but they're boxes, and they're all white. And the only thing that was like a different color was I don't know what you call it, but like the speaker output in the middle, two circles, and they were black, but the whole box was white. Okay. And I didn't really know what to make of that, to be honest. But what ended up happening was we were up there, we were just waiting because there was nowhere to go. So we were just waiting for the water to catch up to us, to rise. And eventually the water comes, it floods the whole thing. And so my sister and I, we each individually grab our own speaker and hold onto it. And then we started using it as a flotation device to let the water carry us out on these speakers to wherever the water was going to carry us out to. And so I remember in the dream that for a while, like, I don't know how long, but it felt like a while, we were floating, in the water on our individual speakers. And we kept trying to like grab hands to like pull each other closer so that the waves didn't let us drift apart. But it was like difficult. Like, we kept losing grip. We kept falling apart and then trying to come back together and struggling in the whole process. And then eventually my sister started to let go. Like, she started to just let go of my hands and kind of started to float away. And I was like scared because she's all I had out there. There wasn't really anyone around us, and we're just on these two speakers hoping to make it. But she started to let go. And when she started to let go, I started thinking to myself, like, oh, like, she has two kids, and this is true in real life. She has two children to worry about, and they're not anywhere around us to be found. Like, she's probably worried about them and needs to go and handle her business looking for them. And so I had this feeling of like, I just need to release her. I just need to let her go. I just need to let the separation happen. And so I released my sister. She starts drifting away, and it's honestly really scary for me. It's like traumatic. This is a dream, by the way, still in the dream. Okay. But it's like traumatic. And, but as I let her go, then I start having these flashbacks, like in the dream, of real life events where I have been separated from someone or something that I really felt like attached to, or just like emotionally invested in, even to the point of like clinging to it, right? And whether that was, relationships ending, whether it was friendships that had faded away, it was, the death of my mother, it was moving away from my entire family onto an island where I'm like isolated, just things that required separation. And now, I talk about this a lot, but leaving the career that has been a safety net for me, there's just been a lot of moments in my life where I feel like I've had to just let go. And I hate letting go because I think I've been through so many things in life, and I felt like I've lost so much that I want to cling to everything that feels good in my life. I don't want to lose any more things, but what was revealed to me after that dream, when I woke up, I kept having this whisper, was the great wave of separation, the great wave of separation. And I knew it was the Holy Spirit talking to me. Like, I knew God was trying to get something out. And after the dream, when I woke up, the Holy Spirit was just kind of speaking to me. And I was wondering, like, what's the deal with those speakers? What's the deal with like letting go and clinging to these speakers though? And So the Holy Spirit revealed to me that those speakers were symbolic of the sound of God's voice echoing through our lives. And that was really a game changer for me to understand that, because it helped me understand that the voice of God that I was clinging to when I was letting my sister go was taking me in a different direction than her. And the voice of God that she was clinging to was taking her in a different direction than me. And it hurt. But the one thing that we know we can cling to in a storm, in a difficult season, is the sound of God's voice, is his plan for us, is what he says is true about the season that we're walking in or the place that we're going as we're walking. And so it was really it really highlighted something to me that sometimes separation is difficult, but when you're clinging to God's voice in separation, when you're clinging to God's voice in the storm and among the waves that are just pulling you and, feels like things are crashing and feels like it's sending you away, a lot of times that wave can be sending you away from one thing, but also closer to Jesus and closer to his voice. And even if you might be feeling isolated in a certain season or feeling like you're losing something, you can take heart in the fact that God's hand is over you in that season and his voice is present with you in that season. And so you don't have to be afraid. It's okay if you are afraid, but don't let that stop you from being able to release. Don't let that stop you from being able to separate from the things that he is calling you to separate from. Because one thing that I know is that to be made holy is to be made set apart from something, set aside, created sacred, right? And so for a lot of us, and I know this is true for me, that if your prayer has been to be made more like Jesus, if your prayer has been to become more holy, if your prayer has been to be made righteous, to be sanctified, to be refined, then you will likely experience several seasons of separation. Because in Matthew 3:12, it says that God will separate the wheat from the chaff, okay? And that means that God is going to separate the thing that has purpose, the thing that has life in it, from the things that no longer serve that purpose, the things that are dead weight, the things that aren't producing life, the things that aren't supporting the growth of that of the wheat, right? He's going to separate the wheat from the chaff, okay? And I think we need to allow that to happen, as uncomfortable as it can be. If that's losing your job, if that's losing your relationship, if that's losing that friendship, if that's losing your house, okay? Sometimes we gotta let things go in order to get closer to Jesus, in order to be stripped of the things that we think are giving us purpose, in order to be stripped of the things that we think are giving us life, and to be set apart into the actual purpose that God has for us, into the actual purpose that is going to give us life through God, okay? So that was something that was just really, really powerful to me. But as I said, the question that I have for you is, what if the waves aren't crashing against you, but instead are crashing for you? And here is what I mean by that. I told you we were going to go to Joseph. So you got to follow me with this because it's going to tie in at the end, but if you stick with me, you'll get it, okay? Joseph, in Genesis chapter 37, is a monumental figure. This is the man who God blessed with dreams and allowed him the ability to interpret other people's dreams, okay? And Joseph was the son of Jacob, who we know was the one that wrestled with God, and God renamed him Israel for that purpose, which we received the 12 tribes of Israel, which are his sons, and Joseph being one of those sons. So the first thing that we have to know about Joseph is that the Bible says that Joseph was more loved by his father Israel than any of the other 11 sons. Okay, so he was the favorite. Joseph is 17 years old. He is young. All right, so at 17 years old, Joseph starts receiving dreams from God, basically indicating that his brothers are going to bow down to him eventually at some point. And they're just like, what? Because Joseph takes it upon himself to start telling his brothers, hey, I just had these dreams and it looks like God is saying that you are going to be bowing down to me at some point. And the brothers are like not having it, because the brothers are like, Joseph, no, like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. First of all, you're not even the oldest of us for that to even happen. And second of all, like, we're so annoyed by the fact that you are already the favorite child. Like, I don't need you to be throwing salt in the wound that, oh, now you think that I'm going to be bowing down to you. Like, I would also be like, you're crazy. But Joseph believes these dreams that he's having, okay? And so God is like, yeah, Joseph, you're gonna be prosperous. Your family gonna be bowing down to you, okay? But Joseph has no idea how this is gonna happen. He just knows the dream that he got and told his brothers, and then got his brothers all riled up against him, right? So basically what ends up happening is crazy. Stick with me, okay? What ends up happening is that Joseph tells this story. His brothers get annoyed, like really annoyed with him, like more annoyed because they already don't like him. The Bible actually says that they like detested him because of the favoritism that his father showed. But by this point, now he's telling the dreams. Now he's just pissed them off, right? And so they're just like over him. So one day, Israel tells Joseph, hey, go out to the field, check on your brothers because they're supposed to be, herding the flocks, and I want you to report back to me. So Joseph goes out. He's like, okay, Dad. He goes out to the field. He's like, I'm going to check on these boys. And as he's walking up, before he gets there, his brothers see him. And his brothers are like, let's kill him. We hate him. Let's kill him. And this is just crazy to me because there's so much hatred that they literally, their first thought is, let's kill our brother. Yeah. So basically they concoct this plan that they were going to kill Joseph. But then thankfully, one of the brothers is like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that, right? Like, instead of killing our own brother, maybe let's just throw him into this empty pit. Let's just throw him into the empty pit and leave him there. Brutal. I don't know. Have y'all ever been locked in a closet by your siblings in the dark and just left there? Yeah, me too. Okay. But this was on a whole nother level of that. So the brother's plan, I think this is Reuben that's saying this. He's like thinking, okay, well, I'll just, satisfy them. We'll throw him in this pit and then I'll come back and get him later. And everything will be fine. They're just hot-headed right now. They need to chill out. Okay. So they agree. They throw him into the pit, right? But then before Reuben can actually go back to get him, Judah, the tribe of Judah, the one that Jesus came from, okay? That tribe. Judah was like, hey, how about instead of just leaving him here in this pit and not getting anything from that, let's sell him to some travelers while they're on their way to Egypt so that they can sell him into slavery. And then we can get a profit off of that. I don't know what got into these boys, but wicked, like evil. What? You're going to sell your brother to slavery because you don't like him? Insane. So they do it. They get him up out of that pit. Take Joseph. They stripped him of his clothes. Like, this boy was probably naked. Embarrassing. Like, just humiliating him, right? And so they basically end up selling Joseph to these travelers that are on their way to Egypt. They sell him for 20 pieces of silver. Can you imagine? Yeah. So they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And basically, Joseph gets whisked off to Egypt as a slave. And then the 11 brothers, tell Israel, their father, hey, Joseph got mauled by a wild animal. Like, we found his robe. It's covered in blood. He ain't coming back. So, yeah. So they had this crazy evil plan and then had their family believing that Joseph just got killed by a wild animal. Insane. So the family's heartbroken. All the while, Joseph is getting sent into slavery in Egypt. So this is Joseph's first instance with separation. Okay. He's separated from his entire family. He's taken from a land he knows and transplanted into a land he has no idea about. Okay. And so, yeah, Joseph is, you could say, down in the dumps right now. he gets sold to Potiphar, who is an officer in the military in Egypt. Okay. And so what happens is that while Joseph is in slavery and enslaved to Potiphar, he actually does really well because the Bible says that the Lord was with him and that God made everything that he did successful. So successful, in fact, that Potiphar trusted Joseph. He put him in charge of his entire household. He made him in charge of all of his possessions, and he had authority in that house. So that means he really trusted him to manage his estate, right? To manage everything that was going on. So even in that desperate, impossible, painful situation, God was still with Joseph. Okay. And eventually, though, Joseph's doing all this good work. He's learning how to be humble. He's learning how to just do well. He's learning how to just steward the situation that he's in. Potiphar's wife, Potiphar's wife steps into the picture at some point, and she got the eyes for Joseph. Okay, she is like, Joseph, you fine. Let's get to it. And Joseph is like, no. Joseph is like, no, are you crazy, woman? Like, your husband trusts me with everything in this estate except you because you're his wife. So no, I'm not going to go and betray him and sleep with you. Right? So she's trying to seduce him, and Joseph is not having it. And Joseph, being the godly man that he is, the righteous man that he is, literally runs away from her so fast, in fact, that she had like snatched his robe off of him. That's how fast he was running. His clothes ripped off of him. Okay. And so basically he runs outside. He doesn't look back, leaves his robe. Okay. And then Potiphar's wife has the audacity to tell everyone else in the house, including her husband, that Joseph is the one that tried to seduce her and that she had the robe to prove it. Okay. Now, Potiphar listens to his wife, and he's like, you know what? Throw that Joseph into prison. Let's put him into prison because he tried to sleep with my wife. Are you kidding me? The scandal. Okay. Joseph was nothing but a hardworking man. Joseph had nothing but a crap set of brothers. All right. And he was trying to make the best out of his situation. So now, fast forward, Joseph is in captivity. Okay. Joseph is in prison, y'all. He's in prison at this point for false accusations. Okay. And so basically what happens while Joseph is in prison is that the Lord is with him again. Okay. And it says, the Lord blessed everything that Joseph did, and he became successful in everything that he did. So much so, in fact, that the warden of the prison had put him in charge of all of the other prisoners. Okay, that's how successful that Joseph was. That's how blessed that he was in the work that he did. So God made him successful. Joseph becomes, basically like a second in command of the prison, okay, managing all the prisoners. And he has this gift still. He has this gift to interpret dreams through the Lord, because the Lord has given him this ability. The Lord gives him wisdom and insight. What happens is there is one of Pharaoh's cupbearers in prison. Okay. And if you're a cupbearer, you work really closely with Pharaoh. That's the concept, right? And so cupbearers in prison, we don't really know why, but what happens is that one day this cupbearer has a dream. Okay. Cupbearer has a dream, and he's like, I need somebody to interpret this because I don't know what this means. So Joseph, being the faithful man of God that he is like, he's like, well, I interpreted my own dream before, so I can interpret your dream. I can tell you that because God will allow me to tell you. So there's something in me that feels that Joseph still sort of believes that even in his rinky-dink situation, a part of him still believes that dream that he had all those years ago when he was 17 about being prosperous and about having his brothers bow down to him, because it's like, why would he go and think, I can interpret your dream for you, if he didn't believe what he interpreted about his dream to be true, even in the midst of his circumstance. So that just became as a highlight to me because I wasn't even in the notes. So anyways, that's critical. Okay. But Joseph is like, yeah, I can interpret your dream for you. Too easy. So he does it. He interprets the cupbearer's dream, and he says, the dream means that you're going to be released in 3 days from now, and you are going to be restored back to your position as cupbearer by Pharaoh himself. And he says, all that I'm asking from you is that you would not forget me when you get released from prison, and that you would ask Pharaoh to release me because I am in here innocently. I am in here under false accusations and I have done nothing wrong. So the cupbearer's like, yeah, okay, I won't forget you. 3 days later, the dream comes to pass. Okay. The cupbearer is released from prison and Pharaoh released him. So cupbearer goes back to working for Pharaoh, and guess what happens? He forgets about Joseph. Okay. He leaves Joseph in the prison cell, forgetting that he ever interpreted his dream, and that the reason that he had so much hope to be even out of prison is because Joseph interpreted that for him. But hey, who's counting? Okay. So 2 years later, Joseph is still in prison 2 years later, and Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh's like, I need someone to interpret this dream. There's not anybody here that can tell me what this means. Help. So, of course, the cupbearer now is like, oh yeah, I remember this guy Joseph. And he tells Pharaoh the story of how Joseph interpreted his dream while he was in prison and basically prophesied that he would get out of prison. So Pharaoh's like, all right, bring me Joseph. So they go and get Joseph. Okay. Amazing turn of events. Finally, 2 years later, we're getting Joseph out of prison. Thank you, cupbearer. So now we have 3 instances of separation. The first one is where Joseph is wrongly separated from his family. The second one is where Joseph is wrongly separated from his position at Potiphar's house, which he considered to be successful. And the third one is now, gladly, Joseph is separated from that prison cell, okay? And now he is introduced to Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh explains his dream, and Joseph goes ahead and interprets the dream, and Joseph tells him, hey, look, the dream means there's going to be 7 years of abundance in Egypt, but then it's going to be followed by 7 years of famine in Egypt. And so during that time of famine, there's not going to be any wheat, any grain, anything growing. So what we need to do is, in the 7 years of abundance that come, we need to store up the grain so that we can save it for that dry season when there isn't going to be any provision, and we'll have stuff to sustain us throughout that famine. And so Pharaoh's like, okay, yeah, I'll buy that for $10. So he's like, you know what? How about I appoint you, and you become the person in charge of storing up all that grain and making sure that we have the provisions that we need for the 7 years of famine. What this means, though, is that Joseph was basically appointed as second in command of all of Egypt. And the Bible says that nobody outranked him except for Pharaoh himself. Okay, so now Joseph is experiencing this vast acceleration into prosperity, into abundance. The land is his. And at this time, Joseph had been given a wife from Pharaoh. He had land. He had everything that he wanted, all the resources available to him in Egypt. And all he had to do was make sure that during that time of abundance, that grain was getting stored up for the future famine that was supposed to come. And so he did. And through his marriage, Joseph ended up having 2 sons. And the first one was Manasseh, which meant God has made me forget all my hardship and my whole family. And then his second son was Ephraim, which meant God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Okay, and so Joseph is still believing and thanking God for his abundance, for his provision, for his protection in the middle of his affliction, in the middle of all this separation that he's going through. Joseph is learning how to still be faithful to God, be grateful to God, be thankful to God, and has believed that the Lord provided for him through all of these situations, even so much so that he had forgotten all about the pain and the wounds that his family had inflicted upon him. Okay. So I think that's beautiful in and of itself. But fast forward, right? So the famine actually does happen. And by this time, Joseph has actually acquired all the grain that was needed, stored it up. into storehouses and then begins to start selling it while the famine is occurring. The plot twist here is that the famine actually hits all the surrounding regions outside of Egypt, not just Egypt, right? It affects everywhere. And so Joseph's family starts experiencing the weight of the famine. They're running out of food just like everybody else is. But what they hear is that Egypt is out here selling grain. So Israel tells his sons, hey, can y'all go to Egypt and bring us back some grain? Because I heard they're selling it over there. Look at God. Okay, so what happens is 10 of the brothers go to Egypt and they go all the way to the high courts. And you know what they do? They bow down before Joseph and they say, can we please have some grain, sir? Now, what they didn't know was that they were bowing in front of Joseph, because they didn't recognize Joseph, but Joseph definitely recognized them. Okay. So what ends up happening is that these brothers are pleading with Joseph to please give us some grain for our family. And Joseph at first is like, oh, heck no. He's like, y'all are going to prison. All of y'all. Because he makes up some excuse like he thinks they're spies or something, but he knows who they are. He knows what they did to him. So he locks them up into prison and he's like, y'all ain't getting nothing. Okay. But then he has a change of heart. The Lord had softened his heart. And I believe that by this point, Joseph had been through so much. But the Bible says that because Joseph feared God, that he had mercy on them. So at this point, God is softening Joseph's heart. Joseph is yielding to the Holy Spirit. He's yielding to having compassion. He's yielding to the fruits of the Spirit. He's yielding to becoming more like Christ in the face of so much pain and agony. Because can you imagine facing your captors that sold you, who were also people that you loved and trusted? Yeah. So anyways, what ends up happening is that we see this promise fulfilled, right, of his brothers bowing down to him, just like the dream from years ago had said. But Joseph didn't know the way that was going to happen. And so fast forward, a really long story short, is eventually Joseph sends the brothers back to the land from which they came from. And eventually, like, they do this a couple times. Like, he sends them there, they come back. He sends them there, they come back. But I think on the second time around, Joseph revealed to them that he was their brother. And so he's like heartbroken, crying. And every time that he's sending them back, he actually is having so much compassion on them. Like, hey, here's, like, he's secretly putting money in their pouches for travel. He's giving them grain. Like, he's still showing compassion. He's still showing love for his family who was so brutal to him. And so eventually the second time they come back, he reveals to them, hey, I'm your brother. And he forgives them. And he loves on them. And he's like, listen, this famine is going to continue for 5 more years. Okay. But God has changed my perspective to know that even though I'm so brokenhearted over what you did, I understand that God used that situation, that separation, what you did for my good, and made me so prosperous in the land of Egypt, made me so fruitful, gave me a whole family, gave me all the access to the land that I could ever need. And he did it so that I could be able to provide for you all in this dry season. And so that was such a beautiful, like, 180 of a thought process of like how Joseph thought about what he went through. Because to me, it says, I'm no longer thinking of the circumstances in my life from a lens of hurt. I am thinking of the circumstances in my life from a lens of purpose, from a lens of God-given purpose, for a lens of how is God using this situation to deliver something? How is God using this situation to use me as a vessel for his good works, for his purpose? And so what I don't believe about this situation is that God just orchestrated the brutal sale of Joseph, but I do believe that he allowed it to pass. He allowed it to happen because he knew that he was going to be with Joseph. And, you know, God was going to have to deal with those brothers however he dealt with them. But for Joseph, it was more like, okay, I know that God set me up in this place to be able to do what I'm about to do right now, which is that eventually Joseph would bring his entire family to Egypt. Okay, and he would give them their own space in Egypt, their own land. It was called Goshen, and they all would settle there. It would be the wives of the brothers and their children and all the descendants and the livestock, and they would be set up. All the resources of Egypt were available to them because of Joseph's place among Pharaoh, okay, because he had this favor over his life, really, truly, because of the favor over his life from God. And so in some way, shape, and form, all the family did end up bowing down to Joseph. They did end up acknowledging everything that he had done for them. And so I just think like that's a beautiful testimony, because now Joseph not only understands that, okay, these awful things happened to me, but God was with me in every single situation and every single step and every single separation, right? And at the same time that God was with me, he was also refining me. He was also purifying me. He was also softening my heart so that I could be able to give back to the same people that hurt me, right? To have a heart of forgiveness, to have a heart that looks more like Jesus, because Jesus did the very same thing. Okay, he gave his life for people that spit in his face. He gave his life for people that beat him. So if that's not a heart of Jesus, then I don't know what is. To be able to love your enemies the way that the Bible commands. Yeah, that's a whole nother level. But essentially Joseph believes this, right? And I think we can all learn from that. But what I was seeing is that in his separation, Joseph leaned into the Lord. In his separation, Joseph honored God, knowing that it wasn't Joseph who could interpret those dreams. It was God who could interpret those dreams, proclaiming the name of God all throughout his time in isolation, in separation, in a difficult situation. And so I just think that's such a beautiful story to cling to if you are in a season of discomfort, if you're in a season of pain, if you're in a season of being treated unfairly, because at the end of the day, God has the final say in your situation. And if you're going through something difficult, but God gave you a promise before that difficult situation, then you can trust in what God said. You can cling to the voice of Jesus, to the voice of the Lord in your difficult situation, to allow him to shape you, to mold you, to change you. And another thing that I think that's important about Joseph is he was refined. Because what I think is that when I don't know if this is true, right? But this is my interpretation, is that when Joseph was 17 years old and he got that dream, okay, of being lorded over his family, I honestly think, because if you've ever like been in a family of multiple kids and there's a favorite, like, you know that the favorite can kind of have this like arrogance about them because they know that they're the favorite, right? And so that was Joseph. Like, I'm imagining that's Joseph, and Joseph already has this like little arrogance about him because he knows he's daddy's favorite and he knows he can get what he wants and he knows he can do what he wants. And now he's sitting here telling his brothers like, yeah, y'all gonna be bowing down to me. So can you imagine like maybe the pride or the arrogance that was in his heart that had to come out before he could step into prosperity, because it didn't look like Jesus. That wasn't of God. And again, like, this is my interpretation, so I don't know if this is really true and this is really how Joseph was, but I really believe that God used all those humbling situations that Joseph had to go through to pull out pride, right? To teach him humility, to teach him compassion, to teach him forgiveness. Because if he had stepped into that role of being second in command, can you imagine? He could have been like, kill all these people. And then that would be it. That would be the end of the Israelites right there. So yeah, like I think God needed him to be in a place and in a heart posture of compassion. He needed him to be humbled. He needed him to be softened. And I do think that, you know, like I said, I don't necessarily think God orchestrated every single evil act that happened against him, but I do believe he used it. I do believe he used it as an opportunity to draw out some of that pride, some of that arrogance, right? And to prepare his heart for what he was about to carry, because the promises that God has for us to carry require a Christ-like version of ourselves, because you can't operate in your purpose, in your promise, trying to bring people to Christ, trying to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, while you're out here responding in anger, responding in pride, responding from your wounds, because you're going to hurt other people that way. You're going to push people away from Christ rather than draw them near to him. And so, yeah, I believe that God needed him in a certain heart posture. And unfortunately, the circumstances in his life are just the ones that God decided to use. But yeah, so I think that's a beautiful story. And the reason that I'm sharing that is just because, like, for me, I have also been in a season of separation. The most recent thing was a relationship ending that I really, truly believed God was speaking to me about. And this is the second relationship where I felt like it was headed towards marriage. Like, really, truly. And I'm talking in this last relationship, like, we were a few months from getting ready to move in with each other. And then, like, poof, it just vanished, like, in a matter of weeks. And I don't really want to get too into it, because honestly, it has been hard. Like, I'm not getting on here and trying to cover up and be like, oh yeah, I'm perfectly fine. Because no, it's been hard. Y'all, I've been crying, okay? I've been going through it. But there's something that the Lord was telling me, was that in the midst of that separation, I had to go through a lot. Like, the first thing that happened is that we actually went on a break. My ex-boyfriend and I went on a break, and it was a 6-week long break, but it was originally only supposed to be 1 week long. Okay. So I was already like really uncomfortable in the space, because what I learned about myself is that I had developed anxious attachment in the relationship. And so the thing about purpose, the thing about calling, is that you cannot move forward with things like anxious attachment. Like, the Lord has to deal with you in that kind of stuff, because if you attach yourself to something that is not God, you will be constantly shaking. You will be constantly moving, because things are constantly changing in this world. Opinions are changing, people change, feelings change, emotions change. Like, what I learned is that you have to be anchored in your God-given identity in Christ, and you have to be tethered to God. And so even the same thing with purpose. You can't be tethered to your purpose and your calling. You have to be tethered to God, because he might shift your purpose and your calling. He might shift your assignment. And so if you're too attached, if you have this anxiety about clinging to a certain situation, then you're not going to be able to pivot. You're not going to be able to flex with the Lord and with the Spirit and with his next instruction. So that was something that was really important for me to learn, that in the middle of my separation in my relationship, we were on a break. I was dealing with anxious attachment, and it was unfortunate, but that was what I was going through. And I'm telling you, like, I was crying every tear I could cry. I was doing all the things, because I'm like no contact, right? And I'm just like worried about the future. What if it doesn't work out? And like freaking out, you know? But God had revealed to me a situation in my childhood where I actually developed some of that anxious attachment. And it was in the silence. It was in the silence of being separated in my relationship that he revealed that. And it was like, before that moment, I hadn't sat down long enough to sit with God and be like, okay, God, reveal this to me. Or it was like, it was something that had come up and I thought I'd gotten over it. I thought I had forgiven it. So I didn't give God a second chance to even like do the second layer of healing, because I've learned there's a lot of layers of healing with the Lord. But basically what ended up happening is that I wanted to break the silence so bad. I wanted to just talk to my ex so bad. I wanted to just like have a conversation and work it all out, because I wanted the control of the situation, believing for what I was believing for, thinking that things were going to work out and that I just needed to fix it. I just needed to talk it over. But God said, no. Well, first of all, he said, no, you can't talk, and no, you can't break up, because that was the other thing I wanted to do. I was like, well, if I can't talk to the man, then I'm gonna break up with him. And God was like, no, you're not. No, you're not, because that's the easy way out. You running away from a situation, or you trying to just immediately fix a situation, is the easy way out when God needs you to sit in discomfort. Okay. And so what happened for me is that God told me, No, you need to sit this one. You need to just sit. You need to just stay. You need to just be obedient, and you need to give him what he needs, which is space. And you need to realize that the thing that you think you need to do is not what you actually need to do. The thing that you think you need to do, which is fix things and solve things or run away from things, is actually your anxiety talking. It's actually you trying to control the situation. And what you really need to do is just be silent, is just be still, is just sit at my feet and just let me deal with you. So I did. It was hard. It was difficult, but I did it, right? And then that's where the Lord started revealing to me all this anxious attachment that I had. And it actually came from a situation from my father. And my father and I have a much better relationship today. But when I was younger, there was just a situation where I made a birthday card for my stepdad and I wrote "Happy Birthday, Dad" in it. And I was excited to show my dad because I thought he would think I was creative. I thought he would think I, was like, tried really hard, put in a lot of effort and would be like, yay. But what happened when I showed it to him is that he actually had the complete opposite, response. And he was really hurt by the fact, I think, that I put dad in there. And looking back now, I'm like, okay, Dad, I can see why you would be upset about that. But what happened is that he was so upset that he didn't talk to me for about a week. Okay. And I'm talking my parents weren't together obviously at the time. And so he dropped me off at my mom's house after I showed him the card, and then he just disappeared for a week, and he would not answer my calls. He wouldn't return my texts. I would call and leave a voicemail. And I was this little girl feeling crushed by the fact that I could do something so detrimental that, maybe my dad doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't want to talk to me. He doesn't want to see me. And, I'm not saying what he did was right by any means, but I can understand that he just had a hard time probably regulating his emotions. He probably had a fear of being replaced as dad, right? And so but that left me feeling just very insecure. It left me feeling like I need to cling to the relationships in my life. I need to cling to the people in my life. I need to make sure I don't do anything to mess things up because I don't want to be abandoned. And, obviously my dad came back around in my life. And like I said, we had a much more developed and loving relationship now. But it was just a rough time for me as a girl being 10 years old and crying my heart out, pouring my face on the floor and hoping that my dad would call me back. It was really sad. It was really heartbreaking. And so what I experienced in this current day in this relationship that I realized was following me, a behavior pattern that was following me into my relationships, is that I literally found myself crying on the floor, God, why isn't he talking to me? Why can't I figure this out? Why can't we fix it? And that was really painful. That was really difficult to look at myself and be like, girl, there's something wrong. There's something you need to heal, because this separation shouldn't be causing you this much pain. And so that's what God was trying to show me. And what's crazy is what ended up happening is that being face down on the floor and crying is exactly where God wanted me, because then he started revealing to me how many people fell face down in emotion crying out to God in the Bible, whether it was Moses, whether it was Jesus, you name it. There's so many people in the Bible who had that exact heart posture. And so where I thought I was so broken in a situation, just can't believe I'm on the floor right now crying my eyes out to God, where I thought I was so broken, God saw an opportunity of submission. God saw an opportunity of complete vulnerability. God saw my whole heart and all my emotions. And so, basically I just start praying like that every day, because that's where I found my comfort, was just coming completely to the Lord with all my emotions in the situation. And so, so I continued that, and 6 weeks went by of being separated. I was really dealing with the root cause of my pain, and I understood that God needed to get me into separation, to let that wave of separation in my relationship carry me closer to Jesus, closer to his feet, actually literally further than kneeling, quite literally laying face down at his feet, as close down to his feet as I could get. That's where God needed me. And so, he used that wave of separation and really uprooted anxiety to the point of literally being delivered from it. Didn't even have an inkling to text anymore. Didn't even have an inkling to cling or control the outcome. Like literally just learning how to release something and let it go. Because at the end of the day, God has every plan figured out for my life. And so if this relationship was meant to be, he would make it happen and I could trust him with it. Unfortunately, after the 6-week mark, we did end up breaking up. Like, it was just done for. And the crazy part is that he felt like God was telling him he needed to let me go. And I was like, what? Like, God told me I couldn't walk away from this. But I understand now that God not allowing me to walk away from that situation was more about making me sit in uncomfortable and learn how to deal with discomfort in a more godly way. And also, the better part is that while I was in that situation, in the 5th week before we actually broke up, God gave me the assignment for Working While Wounded for this podcast. And so that was a situation where I was able to start producing, right? Producing something fruitful from the pain that I was experiencing, from the things that I was going through, because I could talk about how difficult it was, how hard it was, but also how much God was blessing me and healing me through every situation, right? And so, yeah. So at the end of the day, like, the situation was out of my control and I just had to learn to release it. Like I had to learn to give it to God. As painful as it was, I was able to have that conversation and not hold any bitterness. Like I experienced what Joseph was feeling of just like, I'm not mad. I'm gonna just allow this separation to happen. And, you know, if God brings it back in my life and it is meant to be, then like I'll accept it when it returns. But I am focused on what God has me doing in this season. Something really important is that in the silence, when I sat though, the strategy to that was critical, because a lot of times when we go through something, we become stagnant. Like that's what, you know, depression, it's crippling. Anxiety, it's crippling. All these things that weigh us down when we're going through a difficult season cause us to stop moving, cause us to stop producing, cause us to stop walking in purpose. But the important thing is that when I was forced by God to sit in the silence, I didn't just sit, right? I had to pray through that season of separation. I had to get surrounded by people in community. I had to open up and be vulnerable about what I was going through and, you know, what I was experiencing. And I had to ask the Lord, like, Lord, what are we doing? Where are we going with this? How are you going to use this? How are you going to turn it around? How are you going to, you know, what are you revealing in me? What are you trying to show me? What are you trying to teach me? And then as I started working, as he gave me the assignment for Working While Wounded, I had to get up and work. I had to get up and produce. I had to show up and make the YouTube channel. I had to show up and make the posts on Instagram. I had to show up and create, because you can't stay stagnant in your pain. If you stay stagnant in your pain, then you're not going to be able to move forward. You're not going to be able to get obedient enough in the hard season to get to the better season. And so that was something that was just really important, that I really felt like I wanted to stress in this, is that there is strategy to being in a difficult season. When you anchor yourself to God's voice, it's you still getting surrounded. It's you still showing up. It's you still, and it's okay. It's okay if you fall at his feet and you have nothing left to say. Like, it's okay if you're just empty for words. It's okay if you're just exhausted. It's okay if you're just tired and you just go to his feet. But don't stay in that place. Do not stay in that place. Like, get yourself up. Get into church. Get into community, get into your word, get into prayer, and say, God, strengthen me. God, give me endurance, because wherever you guide, you're going to provide. Wherever you lead me, you're going to sustain me. And so that's what it is. It's strategy. It's getting up. It's still getting to work. It's still pushing through, but it's also finding rest in Jesus and in knowing that his plans are great for you. That he plans to prosper you and not to harm you, that He plans to give you a future and a hope. And so that's an example. That's just one. Okay, that's just one example of how God will use a season of separation to really draw you back to Him. And every season of separation is not bad. A lot of times it's good. A lot of times it's development. A lot of times it's God trying to get us alone to sit still long enough for Him to examine our hearts and show us what still needs to be healed so that He can prepare our hearts for what's next. And so you can remember and take heart in the fact that a season of separation is often just preparation for your next, okay? That's the word that I want to leave you guys with today. I pray that anyone watching this can have a shift in their mindset, a shift in their perspective, a shift to see that some things that are painful are actually for your benefit. Some things that are painful actually bear fruit. Some things that are painful are actually just God's refinement, are God's way of producing in you, and that it doesn't last forever. If this word resonated with you, then stay connected with Working While Wounded. You can find us on different platforms like Blogger, YouTube, Substack, Instagram, and now Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I will see you guys back next week, and I love you. Bye.